On this edition for Sunday, March 15th, the latest on the coronavirus outbreak, what to know about social distancing, and how the coronavirus scare is shaping the political playing field. Next on PBS NewsHour Weekend.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Bernard and Irene Schwartz, Sue and Edgar Wackenheim III, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, Rosalind P. Walter, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg, Charles Rosenblum. We try to live in the moment to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments.
Consumer Cellular offers no-contract wireless plans that are designed to help you do more of the things you enjoy. Whether you're a talker, texter, browser, photographer, or a bit of everything, our U.S.-based customer service team is here to find a plan that fits you. To learn more, go to consumercellular.tv.
Additional support has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. From the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center in New York, Hari Srinivasan.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Policies to prevent the coronavirus are having effects worldwide. In the U.S., passengers on flights returning from Europe stood in lines and crowds for hours as the federal government tried to institute new health screenings. States issued new restrictions on public gatherings, even more closed schools, and some cities added curfews. Layoffs and reduced hours are starting to affect employees across a wide range of industries. The president tested negative for the virus yesterday, but the number of confirmed cases is rising. Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases at NIH, warned that the country needs to stay ahead of the disease, even if it seems like an overreaction at this stage.
Americans should be prepared that they're going to have to hunker down significantly more than we as a country are doing.
To think that right now everything is going to be okay if you don't do anything, that's absolutely incorrect. We've got to really always be ahead of the curve. I mean, I say now in a way that people can understand, I'd like to be the fact that we're criticized for being overreactive.
As of Sunday afternoon, there are nearly 3,000 confirmed cases in the U.S. and 57 deaths from COVID-19, according to Johns Hopkins University's Coronavirus Resource Center. In Italy today, Pope Francis offered prayers to the sick and to healthcare workers battling the coronavirus by video. His remarks came as the Vatican announced that Holy Week will move forward as planned, but the public will only be able to follow the ceremonies via television, radio, and online media. St. Peter's Square and the Basilica remain closed to tourists. Italy reported 3,497 new coronavirus cases and 175 deaths yesterday, the most reported in a single day. In Spain, the number of coronavirus-related deaths doubled overnight from 136 to almost 300. Spain declared a state of emergency yesterday, closing restaurants, bars, most retail shops, and limiting travel except for work and emergencies. And in Britain, officials said they will escalate emergency measures this week to combat the coronavirus, including requiring the elderly to self-isolate and banning mass gatherings. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said yesterday that Tokyo will host the Summer Olympic Games on schedule beginning this July. Speaking to reporters, Abe insisted that declaring state of emergency for Japan is unnecessary, but that his government is closely monitoring the coronavirus. Japan has reported 773 confirmed cases of coronavirus and 22 coronavirus-related deaths. Getting home from Europe was not easy at the 13 airports designated for screenings in the U.S. Last night, passengers reported hours-long lines due to the new medical requirements. The Trump administration announced yesterday that it is also restricting travel from the UK and Ireland, in addition to most European countries. At Chicago's O'Hare Airport, authorities asked passengers returning from Europe to fill out questionnaires and undergo enhanced screening. Passengers complained about being packed into crowded areas at a time when they are told to keep 6 to 10 feet apart to avoid spreading the coronavirus. The Department of Homeland Security's acting secretary Chad Wolf tweeted that DHS is, quote, aware of the long lines and working to add additional screening capacity and working with the airlines to expedite the process. To help contain transmission of coronavirus, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has issued guidelines for social distancing. For some, that has meant limiting the number of people in a gathering or encouraging people to keep a distance of 6 feet from others. Joining me now is Crystal Watson, senior scholar at Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Let's get a kind of a basic understanding here. When we talk about social distancing, is it about the physical space just around ourselves or lots of other behaviors?
Yeah, it's about physical space around ourselves. That's the fundamental, but it's also about not going to places where either you could be exposed to many people or you could expose someone if you're ill and maybe even don't know it. We're seeing some more indications that this might be transmitted pre-symptomatically or asymptomatically before people have symptoms. And so sometimes we won't even know that we're infected with the virus.
You know, a lot of people say, hey, listen, I understand how that should work for the elderly or the frail. I'm healthy, I'm young. Why should I engage in this distancing?
Right. So we're taking some pretty big steps here to cancel schools, to work from home. Those are all big things that are causing us to sacrifice a lot collectively. But the reason we're doing that is because we want to protect those older individuals and those people with other underlying conditions that might be more susceptible to severe disease if they get infected with this virus.
And so far, we have heard that this is not a virus that's affecting children nearly as much as previous ones. So the raging debate, at least in the city of New York and other places, are should the school districts stay open?
Right. It's a really hard call. We always want more information than we have in these types of crises. But what we've seen so far is that children, in large part, don't get as sick as other people. But what we don't know enough about is whether they are drivers of transmission of this virus, whether they are actually spreading it when they're asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic. So it's a hard call to make. There are a lot of downstream implications of closing schools, but I think in the places where they have been closed, it's a good thing to do to really respond to this virus and be conservative here.
So how does a society go on functioning in the terms of, well, when we start to think about closing small businesses, that's kind of the lifeblood of most economies. If you start to say, hey, if you're a restaurant, go ahead and space everybody 3 feet apart, might not be profitable enough to stay open. Right. So what are some things that we can do to try to get through this and have some semblance of access and keep people employed?
Well, I think a big business through this crisis is going to be deliveries at home. So if companies can change their practices and be able to create deliveries instead of having people come to restaurants, that's going to be hugely helpful. But this is going to be a time of sacrifice for all of us. And so we need to band together to really do what we can to limit the spread. And that way, hopefully, we will get through this all together and the damage won't be so bad.
So far, have we learned that this is something that gets out of your system if you have it, if you have mild symptoms, you're one and done, or if you have to be hospitalized, are you done then? Is there a possibility of this thing recurring in an individual's body?
Yeah, that's another big scientific question that people are working on right now. We have seen some recent research on this, but we really don't understand enough to be able to know if you're going to get reinfected with this virus. We do have experience with other coronaviruses that cause common colds, and people do get reinfected with them, but we just don't know enough at this point.
One of the questions we had from viewers yesterday was, should we be going to non-emergency standing doctor's appointments where there's lots of things that could go wrong with our health besides this virus? What's the balance between making sure that I stay healthy for other reasons and trying to stop from getting this?
Yeah, that's an important balance. And I would suggest the best thing to do if you have an appointment and you're not sure if you should go to the doctor's office is to call your doctor, have a conversation with them. They can help you decide whether it's worth going to the doctor where there might be other people who are sick or whether it's better to stay home and reschedule for a later time.
You know, I'm personally guilty of this. I went to the gym yesterday almost out of habit. I showed up, I did what I did, and then I was thinking about what was happening in there. Are gyms good places to spread this kind of thing?
I think any place where you're gathering together in big groups and in close quarters, there is the possibility of spreading the virus. I understand the need to go to the gym. I think we need to keep both of our mental and physical health up if we're going to get through this together. So, if you do go to the gym, I would say don't take part in those large classes. That's probably an area where there could be more contact and spread. And if you use equipment to wipe it down before and after, wash your hands really well, and that'll help limit.
Are you optimistic that this is going to reach some sort of peak in the next few weeks for the United States, based on the data that we're seeing country after country?
Yeah, based on the data we're seeing, both outside of the U.S. and in the U.S. now, I think we're still seeing just the tip of the iceberg in terms of cases here. So, I think we should buckle in for a little while. I am not optimistic that it will just be a couple of weeks.
All right, Crystal Watson, Senior Scholar, Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Tonight, the 11th Democratic presidential debate will feature only two candidates, and this time there will be no audience. Former Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Bernie Sanders will not have to fly to the location now that it's been moved from Phoenix to Washington, D.C. The coronavirus has shut down much of traditional politics. Virtual events are replacing public campaign rallies. Louisiana and Georgia have postponed their primaries, and Wyoming is suspending in-person voting and switching to vote by mail. For more on how the political landscape is changing, NewsHour political reporter Dan Bush joins us now. This is unlike campaigns we've seen in the past. This is kind of the time where, especially heading into the month or two before the party conventions, it's full steam ahead. The leaders we're down to two people, but they're not having any events.
That's right. This is unusual, nothing like we've seen in recent memory. As you said, this is the moment where there are more rallies. They're trying to reach as many voters as they can in person. And yet here we are. We saw Senator Sanders and former Vice President Biden start canceling their events last week. They're pulling back. And these campaigns are big operations, Hari. It's like a company. Staffers are working from home in many cases now. So they're trying to, number one, reduce the exposure, obviously sort of reduce the number of large crowd gatherings. And then number two, find creative ways to reach voters virtually.
Yeah, so what does that virtual town hall campaign rally look like?
So we're starting to see that in the last week. Biden had his virtual town hall, essentially sort of like imagine a large teleconference with a lot of people where Biden can speak even though he's not in the room. That was in Illinois. We saw Sanders do a kind of online fireside chat. Even ahead of the debate tonight, the Sanders campaign announced today that they're doing a sort of live stream where they're sitting down with campaign officials and some experts to talk about the coronavirus, to talk about the campaign. So they're trying to find ways to reach people even when the candidates themselves can't be out there talking to voters, doing all the sort of general election year things we're used to seeing.
I should also mention the Trump campaign has canceled some of its events as well. So when you look at all three of these gentlemen, if they are the presumptive leaders of their parties and possibly could be competing to be president, they are smack dab in the demographic that is at greatest risk, right? They are officially the elderly.
That's right. That's right. And we saw President Trump just announced yesterday that he had been, the White House releases, he had been tested for coronavirus. That test came back negative. We're waiting to see sort of how Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden approach that. But you're exactly right. And that's another reason why the campaigns, in addition to sort of following the guidelines, for example, Joe Biden in canceling his election night in-person rally on the second Super Tuesday, just this past Tuesday, he cited official state guidelines. This was in Ohio, saying reducing sort of large crowds, large gatherings. But also, these candidates are out there, at a given rally, shaking hundreds of hands, right? Taking the selfies that we see so much. And that's another reason why these campaigns are saying, wait a minute, let's slow this down. We do have to sort of adjust to this new reality.
And does the lack of in-person campaigns give either Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders any kind of an edge, whether it's based on their kind of online infrastructure or who gets more from this stuff?
That's such a good question, and sort of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, Bernie Sanders has built a following going all the way back to 2016 with these large rallies, with these large events where sort of his supporters can get energized, where the media sees that, where Sanders gets attention. That's one of the strengths of his campaign. It does hurt him, especially at this point where he's behind in the delegate count, where he's trying to regain momentum. Not being able to be out there is difficult for Sanders. On the other hand, we are seeing him sort of break out his full arsenal of digital tools. He has a robust organizing effort online. So he is well positioned to sort of take advantage of this virtual moment, if you will, to reach out to voters that way. Biden, on the other hand, has struggled a little bit more to adjust to this reality of campaigning in 2020. He's catching up quickly, though, and he actually depends a little bit less on those large crowds, usually does smaller events. So arguably, Biden is actually slightly better positioned sort of as they deal with this moment in the campaign.
All right, NewsHour politics reporter Dan Bush, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
For more of our coverage of tonight's Democratic presidential debate, visit pbs.org/newshour. Coronavirus is not the only concern as the 2020 election takes shape. Russian interference in the 2016 race still resonates today and could be a factor on Election Day. I recently sat down with Richard Hasson, a professor of law and political science at the University of California, Irvine, and author of Election Meltdown: Dirty Tricks, Distrust, and the Threat to American Democracy.
Well, so I'm very concerned, based on recent polling, including an NPR PBS Marist poll, there are large percentages of the public that don't believe that the election is safe and secure, that are worried about foreign interference, that don't think they can get the information they need in order to be able to vote. And that way, I think the Russians actually won in 2016 because they're causing us to doubt ourselves. And so I think we need to think about things that we can do between now and November to try and increase the resiliency of the process and ultimately assure the public that there's going to be a fair and secure vote going forward.
We have different election security systems. We have different jurisdictions. In some ways, that has been spun as, hey, you know what, that's our fail-safe, that nobody can hack one centralized server or system and tamper with all of those votes. And in another way, that's kind of inherently also our weakness. We can't deploy any kind of a security patch to fix all these systems at the same time.
Well, that's right. And DHS is working with state and local governments to try to help them. But, there's a lot that needs to be done between now and November. And, of course, infrastructure includes not just the election itself, but think about the power grid. If someone could come in maliciously and take down the power grid in a major Democratic city in a swing state, that would have a devastating effect on the outcome of our elections. And it wouldn't be attacking any voting equipment, but it would still affect how the vote goes.
Are you concerned about perhaps a ripple effect from the coronavirus? Would there be a decreased turnout if people are concerned to go to places where lots of other people go and possibly a sick person could be sneezing around me?
Right. Well, back in 1918, we had a flu epidemic, and people stayed away from the polls in some places. Campaign rallies were canceled. Our conventions could be affected. I mean, there's lots of things that could be affected. Right now, what election officials need to do is engage in contingency planning so that they take into account, for example, that maybe many more people are going to try to vote by absentee ballot than vote. And that creates its own set of problems because it takes a lot longer to process those absentee ballots. So I think we're going to have plan Bs in place. We're going to have patience. Things may not go the way that they normally go in an election season.
What other things can the political parties themselves do to try to encourage people not only to vote, but to have some faith in the process?
Well, I mean, one of the strengths of the fact that our election system is so decentralized is that the public can get access to places where votes are actually being counted. You can demand, from your local election officials to know what's the process by which vote totals are collected, how are they reported, and these are the kind of things that the average citizen can pay attention to. There are a number of citizens who are concerned about, is there going to be a paper trail to make sure that there's no hacking of the voting machines? And that's the kind of thing where, because it is a local issue, you can try to put political pressure on your elected officials to make sure they're taking every step to make sure that there's a system in place so that people can have the confidence in November.
Do you personally have confidence that this election will go off smoothly?
Well, I'm concerned. I'm concerned because I think that, as we saw with the Iowa caucus debacle, when there's any kind of glitch, immediately people try to take a political advantage of it. There were calls by the president's campaign manager and his children that something was rigged. You had the phone number that was being used to report the votes in Iowa. That number was put up on 4chan, and people were jamming the phone lines. So what I'm most concerned about are people who are going to try and make trouble. They're going to look for places where there's nothing nefarious going on, but just a glitch, and try and use that to try to spin it into some kind of political disadvantage. That's why I think we need to kind of harden our systems now so that when people try to make claims that there's a rigged or stolen election, that the evidence will not back them up.
Is there something that states should be doing to try to make sure that their servers, their kind of on the hardware side and the software side of how they roll out elections are more secure between now and November?
Yes, and they're doing those kinds of things. I mean, I think there's not much that you or I can do about the security of the vote itself, but there are lots of other things. So, for example, the media has a major role to play here. One of the things we saw with the Iowa debacle is that the media were very impatient in getting election results, and I think that's exactly the wrong message. It's not just about what election officials can do, it's about what all different parts of society can do, and the media has a really important role to play in educating the public about how elections are actually conducted and how long it takes to get a fair and accurate vote count.
Yeah, it's better to be right than it is to be first. Rick Hasen joining us from California tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Early this evening, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said he wants schools in New York City closed by Wednesday and is giving city officials 24 hours to come up with a plan. In an interview with the New York Times, the governor said, quote, "The New York City schools should be closed, period. New York is the nation's largest school system with 1.1 million students." The governor also said he wants the plan to include childcare for essential workers and a way to continue to provide food programs. This afternoon, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker announced that he will be shutting down all bars and restaurants from end of day tomorrow through the end of the month, but kitchens will be open for food deliveries. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine said restaurants in that state would be closing this evening except for takeout and delivery. This Thursday, NewsHour will present a one-hour special report confronting coronavirus. The program will address public and personal health and the growing economic impact of the virus and will include a virtual town hall. Many stations will carry the broadcast at 8 p.m. Check your local listings, and you can also see it on our social platforms and online at pbs.org/newshour. That's all for this edition of PBS NewsHour Weekend. I'm Hari Srinivasan. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Bernard and Irene Schwartz, Sue and Edgar Wachenheim III, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, Rosalind P. Walter, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg, Charles Rosenblum. We try to live in the moment to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments. Additional support has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.